Seriously? Hey guys, and welcome to this video with me, 6 Plus Stevo. Now in this one I want to talk about Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team and basically give you my initial thoughts after my first game of it. This is not a review. I've definitely not played enough of it to give a full review yet. I've barely scratched the surface. But yeah, I just wanted to give my sort of initial thoughts from having my first game of it and share with you sort of what I thought about it. And yeah, so last night Reroll Joe came round and we set up and got our first game in, and by first game I mean it was really just a practice session. We played sort of a stripped down version of the game. First of all, we used the get started guide that you get in a lot of these box games now, where it's just sort of like a double-sided sort of sheet of A4, which just gives you an incredibly basic entry-level rundown of the turn sequences, and to sort of play a little practice game just to get a feel for the basics. Never really bothered with that before, but there's so much to learn in this game that we felt that that was a good way just to sort of get a feel for it. So we did that for a couple of turns, and then once we were happy that we got the sort of basic way the game plays, we then played a proper game of it. Now I say proper game, we did leave some bits out. We left out the specialists part of the game, which is a big part of it, and we didn't use the tactics and command points in the game. Now these are obviously a huge part of Kill Team and part of what makes it very special. But as I said, there's a lot to learn in this. I have to say, this is not an expansion to Warhammer 40,000. Previous editions of Kill Team have been just that. An expansion to 40k in which it changes up some of the rules, it adds things, might take certain things away, and it makes changes and stuff, but basically it's 40k sort of on a smaller skirmish scale with added rules and things. This is very much its own game, much more so than I initially realised. The way in which the turn sequences work is vastly different, and a lot of the way that a lot of the mechanics work in this game is very different from 40k. Very cool, and some very interesting rules and things to learn in here, which do add quite a bit of depth and sort of fluff and stuff to your games, which I think is really cool. But there's a lot to cover. So we wanted to keep it basic. We just wanted to really get the basics down and have a little practice game of the basics before we start introducing the complications of tactics and specialists and things. But as I said, they're a huge part of the game, and they are what's going to add a lot of the fun and depth to this game. And I can't wait to play my second game and start using these specialist characters and tactics and stuff, because they're really going to enhance the enjoyment of the game, I think. But yeah, going into how a lot of these rules and things in here are very different from 40k. So, for example, there's no cover saves. First off, yet you don't, like in 40k, you get cover saves. It adds 1 to your armor save, or if things have special rules, it could add more than that. Depending on what type of cover you're in, etc. This works in a very different way, being sort of obscured, as it's described in this book, which essentially means behind cover, or there's intervening, things between you, does still have its advantages. It's going to make you harder to hit, and it's going to improve your chances to whether you're injured or killed, which I'll go into in a minute. And so yeah, it introduces a lot of modifiers, this game. Far more than Warhammer 40,000. There are modifiers for all sorts of things. So like if you're shooting, for example, as I just stated, if something's obscured, you'll get a -1 to hit modifier. If the unit you're shooting with is injured, you'll get a -1 to hit modifier. And there are other things as well that introduce more modifiers, and there are also positive modifiers. that come into it as well. There are things that give you buffs, and so yeah, there are a lot more modifiers in this game. However, one rule I really like with it, because of the sheer amount of modifiers, and they stack as well, it could very quickly result in situations in which there's no point rolling the dice. But this game fixes that in a great way by with virtually every action you do, when taking morale tests, when doing all sorts of things. Generally speaking, ones will always fail and sixes will always succeed. For the most part anyway, for almost everything in this game, regardless of modifiers, which is a brilliant, simple fix to being able to make sure the game is still playable, still fun, regardless of how many of these modifiers stack up. So yeah, talking about wounds, you get, like in 40k, you'll roll to hit, you'll roll to wound, they'll make their armor save, or like their feel no pain equivalent, etc, etc. You apply the damage, and if a model's reduced to 0 wounds, it's dead. Simple. In this, it takes it a step further. Once you've done all that, and you've reduced a model to 0 wounds, you then roll a dice to see whether you've killed the model, or whether you've just given it a flesh wound. And so that's a 50-50 shot, so it's on a 4+ to kill it. So rolling a 1 to a 3 will merely cause a flesh wound. There are modifiers to that as well. Like I said, if a target is obscured, when you're rolling to see whether you've killed it or just merely wounded it, they will get a they'll have a modifier on that, so they'll have a more chance of just being wounded rather than killed if they're in cover. And flesh wounds play a very big part in this game, because as we were playing last night, Joe was he was rolling a few bad rolls when it came to shooting at my orcs. So he was hitting them, wounding them, punching straight through their armor, and then when it came to rolling for the whether they were killed or wounded, he was quite often rolling low and they were just escaping with a flesh wound. Now at first this was not winning him over on the game. He was not pleased with that, and felt like it was just sort of another hurdle to get through to kill a unit. However, as we played through the game, it became very apparent how severe these flesh wounds are. For one, when you are wounded, you get a lot of modifiers. So example, when you're shooting, you're getting a -1 to hit modifier, which is huge, especially for orcs. You also you can only be wounded 3 times. Once you've got 3 flesh wounds, you're dead anyway. So think similar to in the way that sort of hull points and things used to work in sort of 7th edition for vehicles and things like that. But yeah, they have quite a lot of modifiers, and they do affect you massively when it comes to the morale phase. Now in the morale phase, any model that has a flesh wound has to roll a nerve test, which is essentially a leadership test. So you roll 1 dice, and if the result of that is higher than your leadership, you failed your nerve test. But there's again a lot of modifiers. So for every model in your kill team that has died, that adds a +1 to the result. For every shaken model in your kill team, that adds a +1. So as members of your kill team start dying and start getting wounded, your nerve tests become incredibly hard to pass. However, with all those modifiers, if you if you roll a 1, you've automatically passed, because an unmodified roll of 1 is always fine. And if you reach a stage where every model in your kill team is either shaken or has failed a nerve test, then your army becomes broken. And when your squad's broken, in a 2-player game, for most of the missions, from what I can tell, you've essentially lost the game. Now what does shaken mean? So shaken's really bad. again, so you've been flesh wounded, you've taken your nerve test, you've failed your nerve test, you are then counted as shaken. Once shaken, you cannot do a single thing with that model until it comes back round to the next morale phase, in which you take another nerve test to see if you're still shaken, or if you pass the test that time, then you're no longer shaken. But yeah, that's huge. That's huge, because I had it several times in the game where several models were shaken, and it's just massive because they become completely useless. They're stuck out in the open, they're incredibly vulnerable, you can't fight in close combat, you can't shoot, you can't move, you're literally just there cowering wherever they are from the horrors of battle. And it's huge, especially with low leadership models and things. The morale phase in this is critical, let's put it that way. And so as the game went on, I think Joe started to see the benefits of flesh wounds. It can feel at first like you've been cheated when you haven't killed something and it's just escaped with a flesh wound, but the modifiers and the negatives that these bring to that model are huge. So yeah, it took quite a while to learn how it all works, because like I said, it's very different. You've also got, there is no charge phase in this game. Models charge in the movement phase. So again, that's very different. So in 40k, you can move, you can shoot, and then you can charge, depending on what type of weapons you have. In this, that's not the case. You charge in the movement phase instead of doing your normal move. So you can either move the unit's normal distance on its data sheet, or you can opt to charge if you're within 12 inches. And charging works very much the same way. Roll 2d6 and move that distance, but that means you can't shoot. So you have a choice there, and it does massively change when you're in the movement phase what you're going to do. Definitely that had a huge effect on the way I played my squad, and I think it will drastically differ from the way you play those same units within 40k. But yeah, there's so much to take in with this game. But initial thoughts are really good. Once we started getting into it and getting into the flow of the way the game mechanics work, we were really enjoying it. And I think our next game will be a lot more fun once we start bringing the specialists into it and using the tactics and stuff. That's going to make it a much deeper experience, and a lot more tactical. And having now played my first game, I can read through the rules, and a lot of these things make a lot more sense to me now, having read through. Because I think these games, you can sit and read a rule book cover to cover, and you can pick up quite a lot of information from that. But I think, certainly for me, and I think a lot of other players out there, we learn best from actually playing the games and sort of learning as you go. And then when you come back after that and then read the rules further, things make stand out to you a bit more and make a lot more sense. For example, a lot of the specialists, when I was reading what their special perks were and things, and you read certain things where it says like, oh, if a model gets flesh wounded, it can ignore it. If a model, this model specialism will, when it takes its nerve tests, it can ignore negative modifiers and things like that. And when you first read things like that, you think, well, it doesn't sound that impressive. But actually, now having played my first game, I can see the huge tactical advantage to having specialists with those sort of abilities, because the morale phase can really sort of decide whether you are going to win or lose the game. Definitely, it has a huge effect on your entire squad. But yeah, so initial thoughts on the game are good. I'm really looking forward to playing some more of it. As I do play more, and as I do become more competent in playing and learning the rules of the game and experimenting with the specialists and the tactics and different units, I will definitely be hitting you guys up with some tactics videos, and a full review of the game itself, and maybe some sort of videos to help other people learning this game understand some of the rules and things in there. But yeah, guys, anyway, that's my initial thoughts on Kill Team. I want to hear what you guys are thinking of it. Have you managed to get yourselves any games yet? What do you think of it? Do you like it? Is it a disappointment to you? Do you love it? Do you think it's the best thing GW have ever released? I think it's great fun, and I see myself playing a lot more of it, especially in the future. Like I say, when I start using some more of the in-depth rules and some more of the advanced rules, and definitely leading into things like campaigns and stuff. I think it's built from the ground up with campaigns and things in mind. But yeah, anyway, guys, share your thoughts below. If you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, that's about all I've got to say for the time being. I'll see you on the next one, guys. 6+ Stevo, signing out.